The drama, A Frozen Flower, is about the bond between a monarch and his bodyguard. The Goryeo dynasty ruler is under pressure to father an heir under the rule of the Yuan dynasty. The king is unable to explore to his queen's bottom caves, however, so he orders her and his bodyguard to have an injection sandwich together instead. Hong Rim and the queen develop a forbidden romance as a result of this sexual encounter. The Goryeo king, who is subject to Yuan, chooses young boys and rigorously trains them to be his royal guards, known as Kunrong Wei. These boys are allowed to live in the palace, and he always has control over them. The king takes Hong Rim under his wing after growing to really like him. The king takes pleasure in every moment of their training sessions and musical jam sessions. Soon after, the Yuan dynasty princess, the queen, is wed to the Goryeo king. Hong Rim grows up to become the chief of the Kunrong Wei, and they develop a strong intimate relationship. While Hong Rim combs the king's hair in the king's chambers, the king thanks him for helping him clear his fever with honeysuckle tea. Hong Rim rises when it is announced the queen is around. When she sees Hong Rim, she is angry. Hong Rim exits the chamber as the queen offers the king tea to reduce his fever. She informs him of the Yuan royal envoy's impending arrival and inquires as to what else they might require in light of the problem with the lack of a legitimate royal successor. She advises him to work harder so they can have an heir, and to her surprise, he asks whether he should take on another royal concubine. The king and queen are enjoying themselves while outside the palace and are being guarded. She wears a perfume sachet around her neck, which she notices and remembers from the first time she arrived from Yuan. Hong Rim watches as the queen performs the song the king requests of her. They are suddenly ambushed, and despite Hong Rim's best efforts, the queen loses her perfume sachet and the king is stabbed. Because the Yuan envoy is scheduled to arrive tomorrow, the cabinet ministers reprimand Hong Rim, but the king recovers in time to greet them. The Kunrong Wei, in the meantime, decide to look into the attack. In a letter to the Goryeo king, the Yuan emperor offers to crown Lord Kyung-won as crown prince in order to maintain order at the Goryeo court, as the king has not yet given birth to a royal heir. The ministers counsel the king to comply with the emperor's wishes once the Yuan envoy has left. The queen addresses the gathering and instructs everyone to back the king rather than Lord Kyung-won. The queen tries to convince the king to sleep with her later that night, but he advises her to go back to Yuan because she is aware of his incapacity to bed a woman. The queen informs him that her place is at the palace and she is now a citizen of Goryeo. After having a hormone sandwich with Hong Rim, the king decides to give him a peculiar task, injecting the queen to cause her to become pregnant. Although Hong Rim and the queen are reluctant to follow the royal decree, they eventually do so. The king approves when Hong Rim informs him that he will be traveling to Byuk-Landu to personally look into the assassination attempt on his life. While absent, Hong Rim starts to recall his hormone sandwich with the queen. The following day, he buys her a perfume sachet after spotting one in the market. Hong Rim learns about the queen's illness. The king determines to schedule another consummation date after receiving confirmation that she is not pregnant. The king finds out that Hong Rim had previously ordered some for the queen after instructing the doctors to bring her some honeysuckle tea. The king questions Hong Rim about the honeysuckle tea he sent to the queen after an injection game, but he refutes it. The king decides to push back the consummation date as a result of his suspicions. Hong Rim notices the queen wearing the perfume sachet he gave her at the consummation festival. The queen's brother, Taeon, came down for the celebrations. When the king notices the queen wearing the sachet and inquires where she obtained it, she replies that her brother purchased a similar one for her in Yuan. To expedite their plan to overthrow the king, the ministers then conspire to bring in Taeon. The queen temporarily departs from the festival before sending her maid to summon Hong Rim to the library where they have an injection game. She then gives him an embroidered handkerchief that she made just for him. She assures Hong Rim that she will be waiting for him at the library by midnight tomorrow as she stands up to go. The ministers discuss the covenant the Lord Kyung-won wants them to sign while being spied on by Hong Rim and the Kunrong Wei men. Because of how long the meeting lasts, Hong Rim is late for his meeting with the queen at the library. The king grants the queen and Taeyeon's request the following day for her to travel for her nephew's birthday. Hong Rim has already traveled to see the queen when the king decides to gift him a horse. While the king waits for Hong Rim and Goryeo by the horse, Hong Rim and the queen engage in a hormone sandwich. After making Hong Rim some tea and flour rice cakes, the queen tells him how much she used to hate him because the king only had eyes for him. She explains to him that making flour rice cakes is a Yuan tradition and that their women give them to the person they love. She expresses her happiness at being one of the women who can do this. The king is in his room when Hong Rim arrives the following morning. When the king inquires as to where he had spent the night, he replies that he had been reading about military strategy in the library. After his meeting with the king, Hong Rim is informed that Taeyeon is meeting with the ministers to sign the agreement to overthrow the king. Lord Kyung-won's covert emissary to stop the Hong Rim and the Kunrong Wei, who then present the king with a covenant that was signed. Sun Ki, the sub-chief of the Kunrong Wei, affirms that everyone who signed it, including the queen's brother, engaged in a plot to install Lord Kyung-won as the next ruler. Later that evening, the king gives Hong Rim the covenant and informs him that he intends to host a banquet at which he would execute all of the cabinet ministers who plotted against him. The king gives Hong Rim the command to assassinate Taeyeon in his home after explaining that he won't do so during the feast due to the queen. At the banquet, the Kun Rong Wei assassinate every minister. Following the banquet, the king rushes to inform the queen of what happened and informs her that Hong Rim has gone to have her brother put to death for his involvement in the plot. When the queen and Hong Rim meet in the library, Hong Rim tells her that he didn't kill her brother despite telling the king in the evening that he had killed Taeyeon. However, Soon Ki delivers Taeyeon's head to the king and informs him that Hong Rim actually chose to let Taeyeon go. The king summons the queen and Hong Rim to his chamber to punish them and to determine how much Hong Rim loves the queen. The queen will continue to try to conceive an heir, but only with Soon Ki. The king informs them. Despite appeals from the queen and Hong Rim, the king is adamant in his choice. The queen enters Hong Rim's room and suggests that they leave the palace, but he advises her to return to the king so that her life won't be in danger. He warns her not to approach him anymore because he is now only the king's subject. Hong Rim goes to the king in a last-ditch attempt to persuade him to change his mind, admitting the affair but insisting that his relationship with the queen was solely motivated by lust. He offers his own life in exchange for forgiveness. The queen tries to kill herself by cutting her wrists out of desperation, but she is unsuccessful. After accepting Hong Rim's apology, the king decides to forgive him and put the past events behind. Then, in an effort to calm Hong Rim's emotions and to clear his head, the king gives the order to serve at the border for a few weeks. The king and Hong Rim pick up their romance once more, and they start hanging out. Drawing inspiration from a dream he had the previous evening, the king paints a scene of the two of them riding together on horses and going hunting. The queen's maid tells Hong Rim that the queen wants to see him one more time the night before he leaves. She also brings good news. The queen is pregnant. To meet the queen in the library, Hong Rim snuck away from the king's bedside. They ultimately engage in passionate sexual activity in the library, but the king becomes aware of what is taking place and arrests them for their crimes. When the two lovers attempt to save each other by begging the king to kill them and not the other, the king realizes how strong their romantic love for each other is. He has Sung Ki castrate Hong Rim and sends him to jail as a result of his jealousy. The queen now understands that the king will kill anyone who discovers their secret, so she dispatches her maid to notify Hong Rim's devoted subordinates, who successfully liberate Hong Rim from prison and depart the city with him. The king requests information from the queen concerning Hong Rim's whereabouts after learning of their escape, but she declines to provide. He kills her maid in return. Upon learning that the queen is expecting a child, the king, as the queen had foreseen, issues an order for the death of everyone who knows that he is not the child's father. Only Soon Ki, who succeeded Hong Rim, is exempt. Hong Rim learns that the queen is still in the palace and not on the run, as his subordinates had been directed to tell him. After some time has passed and he is healed from his wound. Despite their objections, he mounts his horse and, furious, sets out for the city. However, he soon stops his journey after realizing how pointless it would be. Returning to the hideout, he discovers that his men have been located and taken prisoner. To get information about Hong Rim's whereabouts, the king tortures his servants at the palace. When they refuse to cooperate, however, the king has them executed and hangs their heads, along with the maid of the queen, from posts on the gates. In order to deceive Hong Rim into thinking the queen is dead and compel him to go back and seek retribution, she is wearing the queen's jewelry on her head. When Hong Rim arrives back in the city, he is indeed incensed by this sight and decides to assassinate the king. He enters the palace grounds dressed as a soldier during the celebrations for a returning soldier and hides out until he has an opportunity to kill the king. The queen meets the king as he enters his private quarters, but he ignores her and instructs his underlying commander to lead her back to her room. As the commander is about to leave the queen's chamber, she tells him that if he doesn't kill the king before the baby is born, her father will seize the kingdom. The new commander then convenes a gathering of his closest aides and spills the beans on the king, the queen, and Hong Rim. Hong Rim, however, takes action before they can carry out the queen's plan. He enters the king's chambers by fighting his way there, dispatching everybody who stands in his way while ignoring the palace guards' pleas for him to leave before he is captured and murdered. When Hong Rim enters the king's chamber, he challenges the monarch and demands a duel. The king's favorite picture, which shows him and Hong Rim hunting together, is destroyed in the ensuing fierce combat. The new commander and his troops arrive as the intense duel continues, but the king orders them not to intervene, so the junior commander holds them back and waits to see how the fight turns out. During the battle's finale, the king breaks Hong Rim's sword and stabs him in the shoulder. The king asks Hong Rim one more question when he is impaled by his sword, whether or not Hong Rim had ever felt love for him. No, Hong Rim responds. When the king hears this, he is startled, which gives Hong Rim time to charge forward on the blade and slay the king with the other half of his own sword. Hong Rim stumbles to his feet as the king is dying, takes the king's sword from his shoulder, and assaults the guards, but the new commander stabs him to death. The guards try to hold back the queen when she approaches the scene a little while later. She wails in terror, calling out for Hong Rim. Hong Rim understands that the king has not actually killed her as the guards remove her. He looks away from her and dies in front of the king. The new commander then claims that that the king has been murdered by an assassin and commands his soldiers to remove the bodies as soon as possible, while keeping quiet about what has happened. The movie's closing moments feature a flashback to the moment the king first showed young Hong-Run the view of the city and inquired if he would like to live with him. The movie finishes with a montage showing the king and Hong-Run enjoying a successful hunting trip together, alluding to the dream the king had that is seen in the king's painting. Thanks for watching, guys.